Greetings, bird brains. I'm Matt, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ken.
Hello.
And Jeremy.
Hello.
I wish I was like scraw.
Okay, me too.
All right, we can do it again. Greetings, bird brains. I am Matt, and I'm joined by my co-hosts.
My cock host.
Co-host.
Oh no.
I don't know if cock host is what you want to call your
Cock-host, yeah.
Yeah.
My cock-hosts. All right, greetings, bird brains. I am Matt, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ken
Caw.
and Jeremy.
I can't do it. I'm sorry. I'm embarrassed.
Caca.
Is it because it's 11 o'clock at night for you and you're screaming caw while your family's trying to sleep?
Yeah, your girlfriend's like,
Maybe.
what are you doing in there?
My little 4-year-old's gonna come down and be like, Daddy, what are you doing?
Well, fellas, what have you been doing? What have you been up to? What's been keeping your time since our Halloween episode? Jeremy, what have you been doing? What have you been reading, playing?
Let's see. I waste a lot of time on Borderlands, and they just put out another update. Been playing some Risk of Rain.
That game has a great soundtrack.
Oh, it
Mm.
does, man. It's such a good time. I really enjoy it.
Excellent game.
Honestly, this has been the main thing that I've read recently. I've kind of just been, I've just been tired lately. It's been a trying end of the year.
And I think everyone's getting burned out with the COVID stuff.
Well, and it's the season change. It's brutal, man. You wake up and it's dark. You know, you finally get home from being out or whatever you do all day, or if you're in all day, you look out the window and it's 4 o'clock or whatever, and it's dark again.
Mm-hmm.
It's exhausting.
And like, especially in America right now, like with the election stuff going on.
Oh,
It's just like you just want to well, you know what I mean? You just want to, it's getting dragged out and you just want it to go away at this point.
yeah, that's what you guys say to me all the time when I talk about Canadian politics. You're like, shut up, Matt.
We're like,
Yeah.
oh, we don't want to hear about how polite everyone is to each other.
Can't wait to have Thanksgiving and like do my best to avoid talking with some of my relatives.
Yeah, I don't even know if I'm going to see my relatives. I think we're going to keep it pretty low key this year.
We had our Thanksgiving last month.
Oh yeah, sorry,
true,
sorry,
yeah.
Matt.
Hey, Thanksgiving, boom, for the win. We do it early.
Yeah, what do you guys eat? Do you still eat turkey? What is
pumpkin pie?
Oh, okay, yeah. So it's like the same.
Did I look it up with you guys? I looked up someone else. Apparently,
Mhm.
it like predates yours by like 100 years or more.
So you're saying that Canada is the baseline for all culture in America?
Yes, I am.
Come at me.
And just by nature, Canadians are more thankful, I think is what he's trying to say.
Except for, you know, the maple syrup wars that are currently going on up here. I know it doesn't make the news down there for you fellas, but it's quite tragic up here.
I would really love to do a Supers game that's based around something like that.
Might be too soon, man. That's like doing an Iraq war game or something. It's just too soon.
Oh boy, Ken, what have you been doing?
Fuck all. No.
What's been keeping your time other than work?
Honestly, I've been pretty busy. Finishing up some illustrations for a game. My BattleTech clan invasion just came in. My big Kickstarter, so I got like 15 mechs I got to paint up, and then I'm trying to prime all my miniatures before snowfall, which is probably in the next week. And then continuing my medieval Japanese project, which is like a bunch of old Foundry miniatures for, you know, Sengoku era wargaming. And then I picked up, I think I told you, Matt, I picked up that We Stand on Guard. Speaking of the Maple Syrup Wars, I picked up the We Stand on Guard comic by Brian K. Vaughan and Steve Scrose, I think his name is. The guy that looks like Jeff Darrow. He did like storyboards for like The Matrix and stuff. It's pretty cool. I dug it. I enjoyed it.
I need to revisit it because I read it a few years back. I remember it was like, okay, it was all right. I need to go back and reread again. It's on my Comixology account.
I've been continuing my collection of weird short run imprints like Marvel's Razor line and then DC's Helix.
Well, thanks to this, I have started reading the current Hawkman series, which is also canceled now as well, but everybody's been raving about it. So I read the first graphic novel last night. It was fantastic, and I went out and got the second one today. So I'm looking forward to going deeper into that series. I read that the first three graphic novels are just outstanding. It's like the best part of the run, and it makes sense of Carter Hall's Hawkman's his muddled past, which this book Hawkworld just confused even more when they introduced it. We'll talk about that later.
Mm.
That's what else I've been reading. I've started revisiting the Star Wars Clone Wars comic run. I read them. I bought them as they came out. I don't know, for the 2 or 3 years between the second episode 2 and episode 3, and they're really good. I really enjoyed that stuff. It really filled in a lot of material that wasn't being done before the Clone Wars cartoon. So I started rereading those again. And that was almost, looking at the date, it's 19 years ago that stuff was published. 19 years
Holy
ago was episode 2.
Are you guys on that Mandalorian train right now?
Of
Yeah.
course. The latest episode was amazing. For anybody who watches the cartoons, Clone Wars fan or a Rebels
Mhm.
fan, woo!
So I gotta ask you. So I recognize the name so no spoilers. I recognize the name at the end of the last episode. But
Mhm.
would you guys say that you really enjoyed the Star Wars Clone Wars cartoon because it was Star Wars or because you have kids? Because I can't. I've tried it 3 or 4 times. I can't get into that show.
How deep did you get? Because I watched it before I had kids.
I went like 4 episodes, 5 episodes, and it
Oh,
was just bad.
No, keep going, keep plowing. You got to stick with it.
It's like bad though, and like everyone keeps telling me how good it is. Even Rebels, I watched the first 2 episodes of Rebels, and I was like, "This is terrible."
I hated the first season of Rebels. I'll tell you that right now. It doesn't get good.
You
to the
watched
second
the whole
season
season though? Like that's insane to me.
because I was told how good it was. I don't know. Jeremy, did you watch Clone Wars?
It's been a long time since I did. I actually didn't watch like the last bit of it. I liked what I saw. One of my favorite things about Mandalorian in the first season is it had a very minimal tie to the movies or other other properties within Star Wars.
The more ties and like the more clip-ons you have of the show, the more it sort of starts to
I
it
I-
has less freedom, you know.
I hear you and I agree, but I also disagree at the same time because the things that they are taking aren't like, they're not taking main plot points and like running with it. A lot of it, like these characters, there were plot points revolving around them, but they weren't the main focus of the show. They were like side characters for a number of episodes, and they're even changing some of the stuff that's in there. So they mentioned that he's a child of the Watch. Well, there's an organization of radical Mandalorians known as the Death Watch. So that kind of explains now, like, why he doesn't take off his helmet, because you're like, oh, he's part of Death Watch. He's like one of these radical, fanatical Mandalorians. Like, okay, it's deep cuts. Like they're not going like hard on it. It's like they're just like dropping a line. You're like, oh, cool, I get that. I know what that is. But the person that they revealed at the end of the episode, it was known going into the season that she was
Mhm.
going to appear because they announced that Rosario Dawson is playing.
Did you guys love the snow spiders that were like based on the old Ralph McQuarrie art?
I did.
Oh,
I picked that.
yes.
So fucking awesome. I was
Oh,
like,
man.
this is the Star Wars I want to see more of, like the crazy weird stuff.
Oh man, when the egg just kind of like, opens up alien style and just
I really like that. Apparently, for whatever, I don't know if it's on purpose. I love that all of the Star Wars movies have been like all X-wing fighters are fat, like they're all chubby.
Yeah, you're right.
They always like, it's like the Porkins. They always make them sort of chubby with
Yeah.
like this like neck beard, and I love it.
So my wife's not the biggest Star Wars person, but she's been watching this with me, and she got so excited because there's I forget his name. He's a Korean Canadian actor that's from Kim's Convenience, and he was the pilot, and it just made her day.
Yeah. And thanks to Mandalorian, I started playing the Star Wars role-playing game again, which has been pretty damn cool. Session 2 is tomorrow.
Yeah, pretty jelly. That's pretty awesome.
Cool.
You fellas should get in on it. Our boy Jeff is GMing tomorrow night.
That's again, it blows my mind that Jeff's like into it, but I get it. You know what it is? I get it because he hates the idea of whiffing. Like he hates the idea of failing. So I like that. Yeah, he can always turn a negative into a positive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I did 2 combat sessions last week for them, and the wheels turned. Like we did training one, and then we did like the big boss finale at the end. And the ability to like not hit, but carry forward your momentum and give it to the next person. Loved it. Like the people who hadn't played it before, that system, the Fantasy Flight one we're talking about, that's like what sold them. Like all of the options in combat.
That's how you hook the old AD&D player. You got to
It's
give them
true.
combat options.
But you
Cool.
also use that same mechanic for the folks who like to do like the face type characters, because they can also use those bonuses to like shape scenes and things. I don't know. I like that system a lot.
No, I once you get past all the funky icons and stuff, because there's a billion icons that you're like, why would this mean this?
I agree.
Once you figure it out, it's better.
It's confusing. It turned me off the game the first time I played it. All those stupid dice.
You can always go back to old D6. Old Star Wars D6.
I've got it. I got the second edition right here next to me.
Right next to me in bed. Laying down.
Yeah. Exactly.
Heyo.
We're talking
Ouch.
about FFG and she's right there laying in bed next to me.
No,
Mm.
I'm talking about West End Games. Okay.
God.
Well, folks, if you want to give us a suggestion, or you want to drop a line, or you want to see us talk about a certain comic, be sure to send Plewds for us. We'll remind you again at the end of the episode.
Yes.
But tonight we explore Hawkworld.
Tonight we go to Hawkworld.
Tonight we go to Hawkworld.
Have you guys noticed that we've really been like on a pulp run lately? Like we're just fucking just truck driving through like all of the super pulpy stuff.
Would you consider this pulp?
I feel like it has a vibe of it for sure.
I agree. It's like pulp.
Maybe
sci-fi.
like Death Wish pulp. Like if you're gonna like put that, you know what I mean? It's adjacent. Where maybe it's like trashy action movie. I don't know.
Speaking of action movies, the plot, the story, the pacing. So this came out in '89. It really screams '80s to me. Like if you were to watch an '80s action movie or something like that, or a suspense movie, like this is a product of its time, and you do not see stories like this in modern day comics. And it was kind of nice and refreshing.
It was definitely refreshing. It reminded me of like Serpico, sort of dirty cop movies. That's what it sort of reminded me of, and I really enjoyed it.
So a little background on it. It was published in '89. It was a 3-issue miniseries. It was like a prestige format miniseries. I actually saw them today while I was out and about, and they have like a heavy cardboard cover. These weren't just regular comics that were published. It was like higher quality paper and colors and all of that. And this was meant to be the post-Crisis on Infinite Earths reboot for Hawkman. Hawkman's one of those trouble characters where his background is so convoluted and nobody's ever been able to make sense of it. And they kind of said, forget it, we're going to erase it. Timothy Truman was given the keys to the kingdom, and he wrote Hawkworld. He wrote and drew it. We've got inks by Al Catina and the colors by Sam Parsons. And the colors are actually really good in this too. It was so popular that it spun out into an ongoing series in 1990, a 32-issue series. I read this today. I wasn't aware of it. So they left. So this took place in Thanengar, but for the ongoing series, they transported from Thanengar to Chicago. So they were like hawk cops in Chicago.
Yeah, I don't know if you read it. It's ridiculous. It's very domestic.
I kind of want to. I saw that John Ostrander did a lot of the writing, and I mean, he's written a lot of my favorite runs. Period for a lot of DC from that time. So I kind of want to read it now. Between his Manhunter stuff, Checkmate, Suicide Squad, I love Ostrander. So if he tied himself into this, I'm curious to see what his take was.
Well, let's talk about the writing then. Let's jump into this because the writing's good. The writing's really good.
Do you want to bump down to like the origin of him of Katar Hol?
Meanwhile, in the vast cavern deep below the surface of Venus.
He's got so many different origins. So the original was Katar Hol. This is Katar Hol. Right? Katar Hol. Katar Hol was he like? I don't even know the Golden Age one. Was he an archaeologist in the Golden Age one?
Yeah.
Think
well,
so.
I just read the other one. Remember I told you I picked up a bunch of Hawkworld stuff or Hawkman stuff?
The legend. Yeah.
That was wicked good. But yeah, he was like an archaeologist. The Gardner Fox, the guy that made him, the original one was an archaeologist, and he finds like a knife, and like the knife is made of nth metal, The same stuff that they used to make the belts, right? The gravity defying wings and costume.
Mm-hmm.
And he finds like this ancient knife, and he like remembers like all of his past memories, and then he also remembers his like his nemesis, which is Anton Haster, as in the Yellow King Haster, and that was like his original story. Because it all came from Gardner Fox, who was sort of like we keep saying pulps, but he was a pulp writer for like sword and sorcery books like Kothar the Barbarian and stuff. This is a guy that's like connected all that shit. So of course his main bad guy is a guy with a last name Haster.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the Silver Age incarnation, and I don't know as much about it. He was Carter Hall as well, wasn't he? Like he's changed names. Like the character has such a convoluted history.
So Silver Age, I think he was still Carter Hall because that was when him and Shaira Hawkwoman were living sort of like another. They were part of Justice League, weren't they? They were part of the domestic. They were like living in like it was sort of like a romance comic actually because they would do all their domestic stuff and be like, ooh, what a nice day, and like they'd have their sort of like relationship stuff, and then they'd go and fight a guy.
Yeah, and then but in the Silver Age, did they have real wings? Because I know the Golden Age guys just had a belt and harness with the nth metal. It was like wings were attached. And I think in the Silver Age they gave them real wings, but never really explained it.
Yeah, I don't really get it. Again, I don't really get it either. I think Hawkworld was the best idea anyone has had with this because they just throw out the entire Silver Age history. No Justice League, basically hit a reset button.
And the recent series explains all of this, and it's quite interesting the way they do it, and it's good. I recommend it to you guys after reading this. But the thing about Carter Hall also and Shira or what's her name? Shira? I don't know.
I think I always said Shaira, but that's also that's also the animated series coming through.
They're immortals. They keep dying and they keep getting reincarnated. So they've been multiple characters also throughout the DC history. They've been like a knight, a Western hero. There's all these characters that they've been because they keep dying and coming back.
Yeah, and that comes up in Bright as Day. Pathset collects the bones of Carter and their past bodies, and then he creates like a portal to Hawkworld. This is why it's so convoluted because they keep bringing in this stuff. Is this canon? Is this not canon? And it's completely confusing.
This did away with all of that. They turned him into Katar Hol, and he was a cop on Thanagar.
I wish this could have just been how I was introduced to Hawkman, because I would have been a much more like rabid fan than I normally was.
Yeah, this gives you like a Death Wish style Hawkman, and it's wicked cool.
Because honestly, before this, like we've talked about the DC animated stuff, but I always spent most of my time being more interested in Hawkgirl and Shaira because of the animated stuff than I was of Hawkman.
Her personality in that too, it's definitely from this series or the spinoff because Carter Hall's the optimistic gung-ho guy and she's like the reserved militaristic foil to him, and you see that characterization of her in the animated show, which is cool.
I think also Hawkman has been the victim of poor writing throughout the years because I don't know if people knew what to do with him. He's an archaeologist, supposed to be a smart guy, but when he puts a costume on, he basically becomes Conan with wings.
Yeah. Yes.
In one of the earlier comics, I remember reading a funny panel where it's Hawkman, and he in the first panel he finds like a hunter with a gun, and he's like, I tracked down the Black Pearl thief using Earth police methods, and I'll capture him with method common to both Earth and native Thanagar. And it's just him punching the guy, and he's like fisticuffs.
That's something that the current series does well as well. It starts with him as an archaeologist trying to uncover these things about his past, and when he puts on the Hawk costume, he's still a smart guy, but he can kick ass. But he still thinks like, I know DC is like outlawed thought bubbles, so he doesn't think to himself, but he talks, I guess, out loud as he's fighting people, and he doesn't talk like a goof.
It's funny. Did you notice that in this, there's only one thought bubble throughout the entire comic book? There's one, and it's when Carter Hall or Katar Hol is like thinking to himself, and he just like, it's like 4 words. I'll see if I can find it, but he's just like, huh.
I'd only learned that recently that DC has outlawed them. They do not want thought bubbles.
To be honest, I think it's a stronger narrative method. I don't think thought bubbles add anything except for humorous comics, because with humor, it's more fun to see them sort of have this thought process as they're working. Otherwise, it's better, I think, to imply a narration, like a speech over.
Fair.
There's our overview of the convoluted history of Hawkman and who Hawkman is, the many Hawkmen.
We're all
Like,
fairly fluent in comics, and I have to admit, like, we're stumbling trying to explain it because there is so many restarts and false starts. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many times where he'll have like a 1 year series and then like another 1 year series, or he'll just be part of the Justice League. You know what I mean? Or Justice Society.
Yeah. I mean, I sometimes look at this stuff like, how do I explain this to my 6-year-old son when he's trying to ask about the Justice League? He's
What
like,
am I
"Who's
supposed to tell my
Hawkman?"
son? How am I supposed to
Yeah,
tell my
what
son?
what am I supposed to tell my boy? Well, son, he's a space cop with alien technology that looks like wings, but it's not really. It's actually just it's science, and he's um he's linked to another lady who's also a hawk person, and they've died and come back a bunch of times as a bunch of different people and had a bunch of different types of stories, and they're strong and they hit things.
Here, take this Batman action figure.
who's their kid? Don't they have a kid? At least they used to. Like, I don't know, pre-crisis or post-crisis.
I'm gonna assume it's
I know.
Hawk Baby or Hawk Boy or Hawk Girl.
Hawk baby,
Hawk Person.
or just Squawk.
Didn't they have a kid in Infinity Inc. or whatever that comic was? I don't know.
Ooh, that's a
We
blind
sound like
spot
a
for
bunch
me.
of comic book noobs because we're so confused by Hawkman.
No, see, that's the bullshit. So
And
I'm
that's
gonna get
why
on a
this
soapbox
book is
for a
so
second.
good.
Yeah, I'm gonna get on a soapbox for a second. I don't remember people having the insane IMDb understanding of comic books that they do now, because no one used to go on Wikipedia and like have access to these like databases of knowledge. Like, you used to literally just have to stumble through comics and sort of remember stuff. You used to get in massive arguments with people over stuff because both of you are remembering just the blocks that you have read, and you're trying to sort of fit them together like keys. You know what I mean? And I don't. It almost doesn't happen anymore because so many people. Well, for a lot of reasons, but so many people are like these like, instead of reading, they'll just Wikipedia it. And it's just easier to do that. They'll watch the DC show and then Wikipedia it.
Yeah, never stop reading, chumps. Speaking of reading, should we jump back to the writing now?
Sure.
Whew. Yeah.
It is.
There's a lot to unpack here. Does somebody want to give an overview? Just flipping through it, there's a lot to like kind of touch on.
It is like it's you've got like it's very much like a watching this character fall to rock bottom and then pull himself back up and kind of witness the evils and corruption of the world. It's a very satisfying but dark story.
Like, I kept saying Serpico because that's what reminded me of it. Was like, dirty New York, but instead of New York, it's Thanagar. It's like this alien New York planet.
Yeah. Well, and it's so fun. Like, you've got the general idea of like, here's this, favored son of a, very influential family who basically joins what would be kind of like an elite police force, and then is sent to like a completely different style of life than where he is from. And you just see very clearly like the class divide and just how harsh of a difference in life there is. And, it's like watching an idealist witness that the world he thinks he's a part of is not at all the truth, and then just the plummet into reality.
Yeah, actually, a better movie would be Training Day. A more modern movie would be Training Day.
Oh yeah, good call.
Yeah,
That's a
good
better.
call.
That's a better maybe
Good call.
connection.
Yeah, I think more than a law enforcement agency, like equivalent in our world, would probably like be in the military, and they'd be like, "Why are you out here on the front lines? You don't need to be."
Yeah, yeah. Actually, that's even better is military, because we have a lot of military fiction now that deals with like disillusionment and like realizing that you signed up for something that was just all propaganda.
There's so much going on, but like in a good way. Like it's a deep read, because like when I started reading it, I liked him and I identified with him, but at the same time, like, this guy's kind of a jerk because he's got like
He's a complete dick. Yeah, I agree.
extreme, like he's like, I want to return Thanagar to its former glory and get rid of all these aliens, right? Like he's all like, he seems like a guy, except for that stuff. You're like, oh dude, like what? Huh?
Why do we have any of our own wine? Why do we have to get this
Yeah.
stuff from off world?
Exactly. I was like, oh, that's a dick thing to say.
Yeah, there's actually a great example, I feel like, his casual cruelty when he goes hunting with Shaira, and they're casually just hunting humanoids, and he starts to. You can see a moment where the sort of cultural norms are being put against his like deep set beliefs, and he sees Calmoran. He's compassionate in his own way within the cultural confines. Because Shire almost shoots him, just showing like how like weirdly cruel they are to each other. I think the show probably because they're so rich and powerful that life means almost nothing to them.
Right. That scene was brutal, where they go hunting and they're hunting like people, almost like
Yeah,
de-evolved people.
It basically looks like cavemen are like one step away. Like it's
like troglodytes,
but it's so disconnected that even though these are clearly like sentient creatures, like you immediately identify them as humanoids, and like they're just callously hunting them down. And like, oh yeah, we've got a limit to how many we can kill, but whatever, we're rich, who cares?
And he's more focused on using the antique gun than he is about what he's killing. Like he's more focused on the idea of Thanagar, of old Thanagar. Make Thanagar great again. Like he's more focused on that than he is on killing these creatures. And then he follows them compassionate in his own way because Shira wounds one but doesn't kill it, and she's just like, meh, whatever. And he's like, no, you should kill it at least. You shouldn't let it suffer. And then he follows it to the cave, and he immediately recognizes that this thing is sentient because it's making cave drawings showing its like family or whatever. And that's when he walks out of the cave, a symbolic cave, and he hangs up his Calmoran necklace, sort of showing his loss of faith, I guess, or loss of belief in like the ideal of Calmoran.
There's a lot of talk of like how he's this guy that like he really wants to be just very focused on their culture, and then he just kind of abandons it. Like he starts getting into like the weird drug that keeps like initially they're pushing this drug on him when he joins the military, and at first he kind of says no, but eventually you just see him plummet and he just starts taking that and just losing himself.
The 80s parallels with cocaine and all that going on, like they are pill popping like crazy, and they push it on him relentlessly, and he eventually gives in.
There's a complete like drug culture around like the affluent, and like they're all just partying it up while there's all these like lower class servants that are the dominated alien races that are sort of they're living in hovels and shit, and the best they can do is to be the best like server at a restaurant where they're all popping pills and like drinking wine from their dominated planets.
They're also popping pills and running around with guns, policing these people in the slums.
Oh, you're right. I didn't even connect that. It's like a Miami Vice. Like we should try to explain the basic story.
So basically, you've got the situation where there's this horrible social divide, and in the midst of it, like there's hints of corruption. There's something going down where, like, obviously these people that are kind of downtrodden are kind of trying to uprise.
Let's just say Katar Hol is set up. He's framed for murder, and he's sent away for, what is it, 10, 15, 20 years? I remember. I think it's 10 years to a prison island. And that's where he finds himself, and he meets some folks there, which is also a brutal scene where he kills that guy for the wings.
God,
oh
yeah.
my god,
that's so...
When he did,
he goes nuts. Yeah. That's rock bottom. I think that is like the perfect scene of rock bottom. Like he just sees the dude building the wings. He just goes over and brains him, like just like without a thought almost.
Well, it's also really beautiful because that's his like that's his start to the top again. But it's also very biblical. I thought, you know what I mean. It reminded me a lot of Cain and Abel and Romulus and Remus, like the idea of brother killing brother kind of a thing.
Oh, for sure. Because then when the other sage there kind of like basically says he almost pities him. Because initially when he gets called out for killing the dude, he's like, he was going to try and leave us. He was making these wings, but I killed him and I took the wings. And he's just like, oh man, I feel so bad for you. You didn't understand. He was making them for you.
And he reveals that they have their own wings. They didn't need them. And is like, oh, fuck.
And like, so this is so closely tied. That's what's so great about the story. It's so closely tied to the themes of the story that they're almost inseparable, right? Because it's like super monomythical. Like it follows the classic hero's journey, and that would clearly be the moment where he meets his mentor. You know what I mean? He crosses the threshold. I think the guy's name was like Nar Tso or something like that.
That sounds right.
Yeah, like Nar Tso. And he's like, oh, I'm a Wingor. And I was like, oh, come on. Doing that, he crosses this line into in the monomyth, the circle. That's like the special world or whatever it's called, where he crosses into like sort of like the final approach to the end.
He goes to the prison island for 10 years. He's then brought back to Thanagar, where he's left to the slums to live, and he ends up building up businesses and a network and helping the people down there. And he eventually is given the opportunity to face the person who framed him. That's essentially like the overview of this first. No spoilers.
Good job, Matt. That was good.
Yeah.
But we're gonna spoil it anyways by talking about it. So
It's true, but if anybody wants to cut out, by all means, go read this and treat yourself. God bless it. I love the story of this so much. Like, I wish this was how I was introduced to Hawkman to begin with.
I think Matt and you, Jeremy, both mentioned it. Katar Hol is like an unlikable, likable hero.
Katar Hol.
He's not perfect. He's not like a superhero, strong-jawed, milk-drinking guy. He's like a history-obsessed pretty boy who basically gets put through the ringer and then comes out as like a better person.
Yeah, it's the ideal, hero's arc, because you don't immediately think they're perfect. You see their flaws and you legitimately want to watch them grow. And so there's like this weird perverse pleasure in watching them hit the bottom and then pick themselves back up.
Well, this is a character type too that I don't see in modern like writing anymore. It's a character that is genuinely unlikable. Not just like a little unlikable. Like it's not an easy character to write for comics because this is a guy that's flawed to the point of not fixing some of those flaws, which is really cool. They don't go away. He stays flawed.
Especially comics, you don't see that anymore.
Yeah, I feel like everyone in comics is so ready just to pump out another issue, or maybe it's too hard to write a character like this because they're worried that people won't like them.
Yeah, he felt very fleshed out. For something that's only 3 issues long, this is a really solid character.
I mean, and let's even, like, primary antagonist, Byths.
Katar Hol.
He is even cool. Like, if you have to have a good guy, you've got an even better bad guy.
So the only thing kind of bothered me the first time I read it, and it didn't bother me the second time around, is him at the end and his metamorphosis and his change, where he's like literally a monster. But then I thought about it after this read. I'm like, he's literally become all of the things he hates and detests around him, right? Like he's literally become these aliens, these monsters because of the things he's consuming.
He's a fallen wingman who, well, and let's get into that. He's a fallen wingman, almost like Lucifer, who victimizes the world through his evil, and he can change shape at will. I mean, like he's literally supposed, I think, analogy of like the core concept of like the devil.
That's a good point.
It's all about tricking people into damning themselves, which is exactly what he does to our protagonist.
The storytelling is strong in this, and visually and written. Like I want to jump back to that scene where they're hunting that troglodyte. I just went back and looked at it just to confirm. There's no dialogue for like 3 pages. It's all, and I know this kind of getting into the visuals, but it's all just art, and it's so powerful. But again, that goes back. He wrote it. He wrote it that way.
The greatest part about being a writer-artist is that you can think in visual terms. I feel like when you have a writer and an artist, sometimes there's some disconnect, and they have to talk, and sometimes the communication doesn't always work. With Tim Truman as the writer and the artist, it's just his vision, period.
Yeah, and you don't see that, again, going back to modern comics, you don't see that as much anymore. Like, how many artists are given both duties or trusted with both duties these days? It's not a lot.
Yeah, and it's not. And you've got to wonder too, is like how much editorial like oversight was going on with like those artists. And we say those artists. I think we're talking about the big 3 books, that kind of stuff. Obviously, if you're writing your own comic and you're an indie, you're doing it anyways. Talking about Rock again, I just want to point. He really is just the flip side of Katar Hol.
Katar Hol.
He starts off as like this badass police officer trying to keep order in the slums, and then he himself becomes the evil in the slums.
Bottom line, or last word on the writing, fantastic. It's so well written. Very little holes to poke in it. It's solid from beginning to end.
It also does a really interesting thing where they sprinkle in like fake lingo, and none of it is too much. Like it gets close, but it's never too much. Instead of saying shut up or be quiet, he says jam it. They call this felt very 80s. They call like the people around them meat. They turn them into something less than human. And then there's some other words that they use, but I thought it was cool because it helped build the world, some good world building.
It's one of my favorite comics I've read in a little while.
Yeah, it's going to be no surprise when we give our recommendations.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's funny, like reading that new Hawkman series last night. Thinking back to this, it's good, it's well written, but it's not written the same way as this is. Comics aren't the same, and I know that sounds funny, but they're not from 30 years ago. Like I think the storytelling on a lot of this stuff was way more solid than we're seeing today.
Well, you know what it is? It's probably that history keeps the good stuff and sifts out the chaff, you know? So maybe in 20 or 30 years we'll look back and be like, "Oh, that was a great comic," and the rest will be forgotten, you know.
True.
It's the job of the Plewdcast to figure that out.
We're on the duty.
Yeah.
Well, let's hop to visuals. Again,
Woo!
stunning. Tim Truman is a fantastic artist. I was saying this before we started recording. He was a graduate of the Joe Kubert School, and Joe Kubert is a famous Hawkman artist, and you can really see some Joe Kubert in his art in this book.
Tim Truman's cool too, just coming from our background, because he was like a minor RPG celebrity. He like worked at TSR as like a staff illustrator and like came up with concepts for like the Rifts books and stuff.
Quite a RPG pedigree to him before really getting deep into comics. I think from what I was reading earlier today, he graduated and he went right to TSR out of the Joe Kubert School.
Back when they would pay staff artists, which is amazing. You know, just be like, "Hey, draw this today, do that today," and you just hang out the bullpen and like draw stuff for TSR. And he also did work for the Modifius Conan game, like more recently, which is crazy.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I had to go look for it because I have some of the new Conan books, and I was like, "Oh yeah, he's in there."
I mean, I know we've kind of joked about being on a pulp run almost, but like a lot of this looks sort of like that because I would think of like some of the Conan art that I've seen and things of that nature where it is futuristic, but it's still
It has it has the Euro comics feel, right? Like where
yes.
like armor is as minimal as possible, or if it is armor, it looks like it's realistic. Like it's got like it's not like sexy looking.
Mhm.
It's very like cobbled together.
Yeah, like and this is like a fun design where like a lot of the hawk theme stuff actually looks intimidating.
Like they have goggles over their helmets, not just
Mhm.
like hawk eyes, giant hawk eyes. You know,
Mm-hmm. I always found the giant Hawkeyes weird on that one design. I don't know
very
where that was
weird.
from, where he's got
Yeah.
big giant eyes. I was like, what is with that?
In the Green Lantern comics, sometimes they show them with their eyes like that. Like they just have massive eyes. It's very weird.
I also love like the contrast, but you see like the super gritty slum areas, and a lot of that feels very down to earth and grimy. And then a lot of times when we transition back to the nobility scenes, things start looking really trippy, like with the weird colors and some of the designs and stuff. And I love the contrast there.
Do you guys? So I don't remember when coloring started to change over, but the coloring in this book is fucking awesome. They're clearly using like full
Yes.
process color and like painting instead of using separations. Using like the dyes and stuff. It's very cool.
Yeah, it would have been around because this was 89. It was early 90s when you started seeing the computer coloring, and it looks terrible as they learned that craft. So this is right before that happened. Could you imagine if this was colored on a computer?
Yeah, it looked like
It would
dog
have
shit.
taken away from you.
Yeah, you'd
Yeah.
have like you'd have
Mhm.
the Image Comics problem of like flares everywhere and everything has like a highlight, gradients on gradients.
Yeah, people were learning it. They had no idea what they're doing.
It's as good as John Higgins from Watchmen. I know everyone uses Watchmen as like the
Mm.
you know, they always use that as the sort of standard around that time. We shouldn't forget that his inker, Enrique Alcatina, he himself is like an amazing artist, and I think you can see his sort of like choppy inking, like around their helmets, their foreheads and stuff. You can see like tiny little hatch marks, and it makes everything look so, I don't know what the word is, like gritty.
Yeah.
You know, you're not blocking big shadows and stuff. You're doing a lot of like hatch marks and stuff, and it looks awesome.
A lot of the stuff where you're seeing like how the shadows are kind of portrayed, like our villain, whenever he's staring down at our hero after he's just been tricked into damning himself, like he looks dark and evil, and he looks like the devil.
Did you guys know the story that? So Tim Truman, he was the guy that also sort of relaunched Jonah Hex. He like reimagined him as like a spooky cowboy guy instead of just a cowboy guy.
He didn't do the future, the sci-fi one because they did that also in the 80s.
Yeah. Nah, he did it with a guy that wrote Bubba Hotep. I can't remember his name right now. He did like Hap and Leonard too. But I guess when they reimagined Jonah Hex, Edgar Winter of the Edgar Winter Group tried to sue them for a character they made called Edgar Autumn. I don't know ever what happened to it, but I guess no free rides from Edgar Winter.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm looking at the Jonah Hex. I do remember this. I've never read it, but I do remember this. It was Vertigo. It obviously did not stick as well as Hawkman did, though, because Jonah Hex
We got a Jonah
disappeared
Hex movie
quite a
though,
bit.
don't we? No Hawkman
Yeah, but
movie.
but the Jonah he just got cast in Black Adam, Hawkman.
I saw
He's
that.
gonna
Yeah,
be in
yeah.
it. The
Hmm.
Jonah Hex series that came later, I want to say what, the late 90s, early 2000s was fantastic. But we're not here to talk about Jonah Hex. That was the Jimmy Palmiotti
Yep.
Jonah
Yeah,
Hex.
yeah.
So good. So many good artists on that. But yeah,
Fair.
visuals, art. Ken, you're kind of the expert here. I can just say it's gorgeous. It looks nice. It looks really good.
I'm not an expert. I'm just another schmo like you.
You're a trained artist. How about that? I'm not.
I love the marriage of Tim Truman and Enrique Alcatina, and I love the painted backgrounds. And I love everything. I love everything about it. It's a timeless book, and
It
the art
is.
style fits for what they're telling. Which so many times I see comics where I'm like, well, I really wish they got a different artist for this. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Or I think like, this
Yeah.
guy would have been better for
It-
this, but this was a perfect fit, I think.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like the sum is greater than the individual parts because like the storytelling is great, the look of it is great, and like there's a lot of visual storytelling. Like you mentioned the hunting trip or whatever, and they just marry together just into something beautiful. Just
At the
amazing.
beginning there, where it shows the hawk eat the lizard, and then the lizard eat the hawk, and then it
Mhm.
zooms out on Calmoran above the city. That's such a cool shot.
And then
Yeah.
it breaks to like a helicopter, like a modern day helicopter, and you're like, "What am I? What?"
Mhm.
Because you're expecting them to be flying through the sky with
Yeah.
their wings, and they're like dropping in on a mission on a helicopter. It's so good.
Yeah, the militaristic Thanagar is cool. It's a very cool idea. They do, you're right. I didn't even catch it, and now that you mentioned that it's very 80s, it really is. It's like it's that obsession with like guns and fighting like gangsters, and like it's the 80s, so everyone's like dealing drugs. It's completely like Miami Vice.
Mm.
And you touched on this, Ken. You said it's timeless. Jeremy and I were talking about before we went live. Like other books that were rebooted in the 80s and 90s, they look like they were from the 80s and 90s. This, like, you can pick it up today and it doesn't look like a product of the 80s. Like, there's no, Superman's not running around in a mullet or anything. Like, Katar Hol has long hair in this, but it's not out of place. It's not like a mullet. It's drawn so well, and the design is so good for Hawkman. This militaristic design, you could put it in a modern comic today, and it would not look dated or out of place at all.
And they do the awesome thing where his costume is actually like a historical costume that they used to train in, doing like that weird Thanagarian martial arts. And I was like, yes, I
Mhm.
love shit like that. That was so cool. And like, you're right, because this is contemporary to the Man of Steel. That when they retconned, Superman, and they made Lex Luthor the white suited criminal. It's the same time period. I think that was like 1986.
Yeah,
And-
John Byrne had just a few years prior rebooted Superman post Crisis.
And it looked pretty dated compared to this.
Do we have anything else to add on visuals
They can draw the shit out of some hawk people, let me tell you.
and aliens? The aliens, they're so varied and they're
Yeah.
so detailed.
Oh, you know what? The other thing that was cool is when Byth finally goes full on creature and he like changes. The first time
Oh.
he does it, where he explodes out of his stomach, I was like, "What a crazy fucking panel that was!"
Yeah. Just full on Cronenberg, like make your skin crawl, makes me uncomfortable and love it at the same time.
2000 AD influence definitely there. Heavy metal 2000 AD.
It's that Euro comics thing, and then you add Alcatina, who's Argentinian.
Well, themes. I think we've touched on a lot of themes already. We've got the religious themes. We've got the classic hero's journey is in there.
I think underpinning the whole thing is like power and corruption, right? I think that's the first one, is because there's so much of this book about what people do with power and how power changes people and how you can take power or give power. You know what I mean? It's there's just so much in
Mhm.
it that we could spend days, weeks talking about it.
Yeah, because it touches like they even give a great example of like, oh, hey, do you remember the story about the lady who used to be a princess on her own world and she came here and the best she could be was the equivalent of like a maid? It was
That's a
heartbreaking.
really good example. Yeah, good point. I forgot about that. Yeah.
I was just gonna say they talk about Hawkworld being a double meaning, like a world where the strong prey on the weak. And that's also a great example. Is the
Mhm.
title is also sort of a double meaning. Yeah, I mean, plus there's like a lot of what's the word? Masonic, Messianic. What's what I'm looking for here?
Mm.
Messiah
Messianic, Massima.
Katar Hol.
Anyways, there's a lot of scenes where it reminds me of Hawkman being this like recurring personality throughout time, and he can never escape this loop. It connects to this idea of being mythical, right? Like it's like this story that keeps getting told
Mhm.
over and over again.
Oh, for sure. And then even within this comic, you still kind of get your own deeper cuts of him talking about, allegedly before they came into power, they were founded by some guy that used to be a slave himself and rose up against another regime.
That's the Calmoran guy, and then at the end he goes, he's like the world likes its heroes after he gave up on Calmoran earlier in the book.
Yeah, so it's kind of both hopeful and sad at the same time because I feel like that's maybe a theme in its own right. Is kind of like the becoming disillusioned is definitely a strong theme, and yet the idea that fighting anyways, like pushing through and still trying regardless of that, I kind of enjoy that as well.
It's not like preachy either, because then you still got this like ex cop that's like wants to murder the bad guy. So it's still like power fantasy. It's still very
Yeah,
fun to
yeah.
read. Tough superhero guy that wants to go beat up the bad guy. Like it's still very fun to read. But you also have these lofty, background stuff coming at you that you pick up on. So it's great.
Yes.
This would make a fantastic Hawkman movie and or one of those
Yes.
DC animated movies that the more mature ones are putting out. This would be like it's a crime it's not in print right now. Like it's only available in Comics Out. You can't get a physical book of this.
It would be a crime to put it
Mm.
into a cartoon form, I think.
Have you watched them though? They're good. A
They're
lot of those
they're
DC
good, but
animated
they're
movies are
they're
good.
not great. And like I think this deserves to either be this or nothing. Like this or a miniseries or a movie. You know what I mean? I don't think it should be. Um, I don't know. That animation, it's always it either it's hit or miss, and when it hits, it's still sort of cheap looking. I think.
Y- My thing would be I would have a hard time comparing a cartoon compared to the amazing art in this versus if it was live action, I could kind of have that weird disconnect. I'm not saying that's logical, but sometimes I'm more forgiving. It's like, oh, it's a new medium. It's not exactly the same. I'm a
No,
little
that's a good
more
point. No, that's a very good
lenient.
point because no, you're right. Because when they did the animated version of Dark Knight Returns, they used Frank Miller style, and I think if you'd done it in a different style, it would not have translated well. New Frontier, they kept Darwin Cook's,
New Frontier was great. You're right. That was a good one.
and Darwin
But
Cook is.
Darwin Cook's work it lends itself to animated style. I don't think this would.
I don't think it would translate, and you'd lose. Like you couldn't do Tim Truman's art animated unless you're doing like I don't know, like a heavy metal cartoon. You went
Oh
like
man, that'd be so
that direction.
awesome. Yes. I take it back. If you did that, I'd love
Okay.
it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm willing to say with the caveat, if you could pull off some heavy metal nonsense, okay, I'm in.
Some of that heavy metal shit, I'm in.
Yes.
But yeah, that kind of went off a tangent. I just thought it popped in my head. I was like, man, I'd love to see a movie of this. This would translate
No,
so
I
well.
thought it too. When I was done reading it, I was like, out of all the bullshit movies that we've built, off of amazing we just spoke about Man of Steel with the John Byrne Man of Steel. Like that was, the basis for two movies. This is so much better soil to grow something out of, I think.
Yes. I would love to see this come out and then watch Hawkman get like a sudden surge in popularity. Like, let this be the equivalent of the Iron Man syndrome, where like this character that used to not be the thing is now like everybody's household name.
Dude, they could never make this character though. We just talked about how unlikable he is. Just people wouldn't want to see that in a superhero movie, I think. How about Jeremy
Ye-
instead 6 more Batman movies telling the same
ye-
story over and over
No,
again?
I think you could do it as like an HBO miniseries,
Yeah.
like they did with Watchmen. You could pull it off on something like that.
Yeah,
You did
especially
limited.
if you had like talent at that level, because
Mm,
that was a pretty good show too. So yeah, you're right. You're right.
yeah, it was. I don't expect it, but I can hope. I would really love it.
Well, AT&T is looking to make a lot of bank off their properties they just bought, and this is one way, make some good media for people to
Mm.
consume, and they go buy all the T-shirts and books and everything else tied to it.
Can you imagine? I can't even imagine a world where Hawkman is popular. Although Shayura was popular in the animated show, so
She was
She was
she-
badass.
Yeah.
So
She was. And I agree with you. After reading this, I can see a lot of her personality in that show feels very much like it's
we
out of
didn't. Oh
this.
man, we didn't even touch on. We should touch on Shaira.
Yes, I was about to say, like,
Oh yeah. All right, let's rewind and talk about her.
yeah. Yeah, like whenever we do the whole, like, we talk about the reincarnation stuff with them. I remember when I was reading through this the first time and you're first meeting Shaira, and especially during the hunting trip, I'm like, this just feels, it feels wrong. Like, it's not my place to say this is wrong, but she didn't feel right. And so then whenever you meet the real Shaira, who isn't really Shaira, but she's just called that, I loved it.
Yeah, the first one you meet is a bad person. Like there is no redeeming qualities about her whatsoever. But you're reading it.
She is bad, but within their culture, she's just normal. She's just that is how people are, which is a.
I know,
but it's shocking to us because we're like, what a terrible person.
And the thing is, we all know that they're destined to be together. They're destined to fall in love over and over and over again as they're resurrected. You're like, how is he supposed to be with her? She's horrible. There's that scene at the party where
she's the worst.
that waiter bumped into her or whatever, and she like lost on them, and she was gonna. Did she hit them? I can't remember what happened.
She loses her mind on him, and then everyone's just like, yeah, fuck that guy. Like it's and you're just like, as the reader, you're like horrified. For me, I remember being like, oh my god, her face contorts from this beautiful woman to like this cruel harpy, like in a matter of seconds.
They played her normal up until that point, and you're like, okay, this is Shaira.
Yeah, she was sort of just vapid, like
yeah,
one dimensional.
And then she does that, and you're like, what? I don't want our hero ending up with her. This isn't right. No, she's terrible.
Right.
Well, and then not just that, but you're like, and how is she going to become one of our heroes? Like, how is she going to become this character that we put our faith in as like a sort of a story vessel? And it's like, well, eventually you're like, oh, I get it. Never mind.
Yeah, the payoff is worth it. But I was initially just like, how? What's going on here?
I loved at the end where they're like in this like attack helicopter, like on their way to go kill like a drug dealer. My only complaint is the single speech bubble that they put into it. I've been frantically...
Thought bubble?
Yeah, the thought bubble. It's silly. Because it's like,
whatever.
It completely, for one moment, took me out because I was like, wait, the one thought bubble? And then it just goes back to not using them.
Jeremy gave us, I think, just launched the final thoughts. You gave us his final thoughts, right?
Okay.
Just to echo what you said, like, go ahead, like, skip, read. What's your verdict?
Man, read it. Show it to anybody else who in any way likes comic books or just decent storytelling. Share this.
Yeah. Ken?
Yeah, I gotta agree. I've seen a few people say that it's like sort of nothing special, and say that it's like overrated. Reading some other reviews when I was trying to find it to get the physical copy. But I don't think we read the same book. I think those people I don't know what they read, but this was like unusually gritty in the best way. A hell of a good book. Fucking 5 issues, 3 issues, what did we say it was?
It's only 3 issues.
It's incredible.
That's it.
In 3 issues, it tells a better story than most books I've read. I go out and buy it. Run out and find it. Search for it. It's that good.
Yeah, I agree. I'm right there with these guys. Find it, read it. Like I said, it's a crime that is not in print right now. Like this thing should be in print. You should be able to pick it up off of the shelf, the comic book store, a bookstore, whatever. So then you can share it, like Jeremy said, hand it to the next person and spread the word about this. I think the first time I read it was digitally on Comixology, but I remember at the time reading it through in one sitting and just being blown away by this comic. I was like, where has this thing been? Why have I never read this before? I was drawn to it by the art. I was drawn to it by the design, the redesign of Hawkman, that militaristic design. And I'm so glad I bought it, I don't know, 10 years ago or whatever it was when it was on sale on Comixology. The writing is different today than it was back then. Because this is also only 5 years after Watchmen, 5 years after Dark Knight Returns. Like that period in the 80s, we had some phenomenal comics that were coming out.
I'm trying to think of some of the other comics I've just picked up, like Southern Cross by Becky Cloonan. Some of the stuff I've picked up is so bad. Not that Becky Cloonan's bad, but that I thought was pretty terrible. And then I read this and it was like a punch in the face. I was like, God, there are just better books,
But this one's a hidden treasure. People, it gets overshadowed by other great comics from that time period, and people should give this one a chance. It's not overrated, like those reviews said that you read.
They're dummies.
They are big Stinky dummies.
This book will make a Hawkman fan out of anybody.
It's funny because did you
Yeah.
guys? I don't know about you. I went out and bought some Silver Age Hawkman and then a few other books because I was like, oh well, maybe I missed something because I did. I did exactly what you just said. I went out and tried to find some more Hawkman.
I bought the current series. I'm making my way through it thanks to this, revisiting this book.
I want more Hawkman now, which is not something I would have expected myself to say.
Jeremy just wants more Hawk.
All the
Dude.
Hawk.
Yeah.
I'm a simple man. I know what I want.
All right.
All right. Well, with that, we want to do a reminder at the end of the show. Also, send Plewds for the next episode. Tell us what you thought of Hawkworld if you've read it or if you pick it up thanks to us. Let us know if there's a book you want us to read and talk about on here. Just drop us a comment if you're enjoying the show. Let us know. We'd love to hear it. All 10 of our listeners, we want to hear from you.
You can even just leave us really mean comments. We look forward to that.
We'll play them in a future episode. You'll hear yourself.
Well, we'll play some of them unless you use really color. No, we will. We'll play them.
What? But follow us on Twitter. You can find us on YouTube, even though I don't think we have anything on there yet, but we talked about it this week. Instagram, search for Plewdcast, Plewd cast. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode. Thank you, gentlemen, for reading Hawkman, and we'll be back next month with a new.
Yeah, we haven't decided on the next book, but we'll figure it out.
I think the next pick is yours, Ken.
Me?
Because you did the first one. You did.